I think the hope was from a lot of Marco Rubio's colleagues that by taking Marco Rubio and hoisting him so he could give some position in favor of America or American alliance structure on a global stage, even if it's from somebody that I don't even like their foreign policy. I don't even like Marco Rubio's foreign policy. I think he's way too hawkish on a lot of issues. But the idea was for people in the Senate that by having him in there, instead of just having Tulsi Gabbard and RFK telling the president what to do around Ukraine, then maybe they could salvage the situation. That ended up being complete bullshit. That didn't end up meaning anything. And from all the reports I'm reading, Marco Rubio basically has no power. I mean, I don't want to say no power as in literally powerless. I'm sure he can talk to the president. But what I'm saying is what the reports I'm getting, for example, there was a report published by Vanity Fair that seems to indicate that Marco Rubio is like the last to learn about foreign policy decisions, even though he's the Secretary of State. And we're getting this from like 4 separate GOP sources. And I mean, like, if you see him in this meeting, you see his expression on his face, that he looks like he's dead inside. I've never seen him so soulless. I've never seen him so void of anything when Marjorie Taylor Greene's boyfriend behind him to his top left was asking Zelensky why he's not wearing a suit. And he has to just sit there and boil and live with what his party has become. Reagan is dead, long dead. Not that he was that great to begin with, but that party is still dead. And now you have Trump's party. And I think Marco Rubio is a dying breed in a new party. I wanted to read a little bit about just how powerless Marco Rubio is from this Vanity Fair article. Listen to the title on this. Trump, Ukraine, and the memeing of Marco Rubio. Why the Secretary of State's stone-like posture during the Zelensky meltdown might have been exactly as you observed. Even as it was happening on Friday, the Oval Office blow-up between President Donald Trump, Vice President J.D. Vance, and the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has been cast as one of America's darkest moments on the world stage. The televised dress-down of an embattled Democratic ally sent an undeniable signal that Trump's long history of flirting with Vladimir Putin's autocratic Russia has gone full tilt, a prelude to his announcement on Monday evening that he was pausing all military aid to Ukraine. On Tuesday afternoon, Zelensky publicly offered a reset on the peace process. And today, Wednesday afternoon, Trump is now, Wednesday around noon, Wednesday morning, he ended all intelligence sharing as well, and all forms of seemingly like basically all forms of aid support. All support. It's seemingly ending the alliance, at least for now. Perhaps nothing personified the old guard foreign policy reaction to the Friday meeting more than the image of Secretary of State Marco Rubio sitting on the sofa next to a grinning Vance. It instantly became the stuff of memes, body language expert reactions, etc. Okay, who cares? I want to get to the inside scoop. While Rubio was quick to get in line days after the Zelensky showdown, we're going to be watching an interview he did defending the administration on CNN. That was just, it seemed like he didn't even know what to say. The historic confrontation did indeed reveal a fault line inside the administration. Rubio is privately frustrated that Trump has effectively sidelined him. According to 4 prominent Republicans close to the White House, Rubio, who has been a Russia hawk and Ukraine supporter, has told people he is upset by his lack of foreign policy influence, despite being, on paper, the administration's top diplomat. And, I mean, compared to J.D. Vance, RFK, Tulsi Gabbard, Marco Rubio does have more foreign policy experience than all of them. Hell, all of them combined, really. And the reason why is he's worked in the Senate longer, and he's had experience on Senate foreign affairs issues much longer. And that's why he got through the Senate with a 99-0 vote, with the only vote that wasn't in favor of him being Marco Rubio. Point is, Marco Rubio is, like, he was hoisted in there because on paper he had more experience than everybody else in the administration. Basically everybody of those high profile positions. Yet, I mean, that doesn't matter if no one listens to you. One of the sources said they felt as though Rubio is often the last to know when foreign policy decisions are made in the White House. What does that mean? That means other people are the first to know, yeah? That means other people are the first to be in those rooms. That means Marco Rubio is not in those rooms when these decisions are being made. I remember, I'm sorry, I will keep bringing this up till the end of time, okay? About all the different conservative guests we had on the show, Lactoid, Jeptan, on the night of the election. I was silent like a church mouse on election night because I was running through the scenarios and how support for Ukraine could continue, how it could still maneuver to make sure that Ukraine gets the best deal possible. How do we make sure not to encourage Russian behavior so we get a repeat of this in Moldova, another invasion of Georgia, another invasion of Ukraine just a few years down the road with no security guarantees. And I'm running through all these scenarios, and I got all these people, all these conservatives on election night telling me, as I'm surrounded by like 5 or 6 of them, don't worry, Dylan, don't worry, Dylan. Trump will not have a hands-on approach. I'm getting flashbacks live on that show to 2016. The experts in the room, Dylan, don't you know that it was all just campaign jargon? He wasn't serious like he was serious for the last decade. He's not serious, but he was. And now the experts, whether it be Keith Kellogg, who's the peace envoy, and, you know, while he's visiting wounded Ukrainian veterans and saying American support will continue, we will not pull back, within a few weeks, American support completely pulled, the American-Ukrainian alliance dead, and I see him having zero influence basically whatsoever. Marco Rubio, same thing. Basically zero influence whatsoever. And from what this report is saying, if this report is true, not only does Marco Rubio, not only is he like, okay, I'm not the decision maker. I'm not the one really grabbing the president here and like saying, this is the way to go, sir. I know, look at the experience. We need to talk to some regional experts. No, he's not even in the room when these decisions are made. If he's the last to learn about a decision, that indicates that he wasn't even having an influence on the decision makers when these decisions were made. It's not just about being out of the loop. I mean, it's being out of I'm learning things late. It's like, well, no, it's not just about learning things late. The Secretary of State's job is to inform the president, is to advise the president, is to help deal with these like foreign. This is the Secretary of State's job. This is like his one job. And they don't trust Marco Rubio to do that one job, even though, again, not my man. Marco Rubio's not my guy on paper. And I think off paper too. He is the one in the administration of its upper echelons that has the most foreign policy experience. It sure isn't J.D. Vance. It sure isn't Tulsi Gabbard. It sure isn't RFK. It sure isn't Kash Patel. It sure isn't Pam Bondi. It sure wouldn't have been Matt Gaetz. So why is Marco Rubio being sidelined? I mean, I'm going to be honest. If Marco Rubio was in those rooms, let's say he tried to genuinely move the president one way or the other. How do we think that goes when little Marco, which was Trump's nickname for him, tries to push back on the president of the United States, even if he was in these decision-making rooms? Sir, I think we should continue to support Ukraine because of deterrence. Deterrence? There's an ocean between us and Europe. What do we need to deter about? That's their problem, not our problem. Well, sure, but the democratic values, fuck off. Why should we continue to support Ukraine? Where Russia can offer us much more minerals. I just don't see him getting in the trenches and making the best possible argument. And he's certainly not from an argument from where he cares about. I think the only way he'd be able to succeed is if he could make an argument that would be better for Trump, that the American people still support Ukraine, they love Ukraine, and they'll love you if you can do what Obama and Biden couldn't. Like, that would be maybe a pitch I could see working. But on issues of deterrence, on issues of American national security, anything ideological or values-based, humanitarian reasons, the Ukrainian people's right to self-determination, the upholding of law and justice on the international stage, with international partners, with the Europeans, leading a lot of the way, not just us going it alone, but making multilateral coalitions. None of this, I think, really matters to Trump. I think, those personal transactions still matter. The deal making matters. Being able to wave a piece of paper around and say, look at me, I won. Or look at me, I achieved this piece. Give me a prize. I think that type of stuff matters much more. And complicated long-term, power building to give your ally the best position possible. That's not the 24-hour promise, quick reward, reopen relations with Russia, peace deal, Nobel Prize winning, avenue. And so if Marco Rubio tries to go that route because it's best for the United States, or it's best for European security, or it's best for NATO, it's best for American credibility, you would still need to make Trump care about these things. You would still need to make Trump care. And that is a problem in and of itself. And I don't think that is something we're going to achieve in the next 4 years. So we have to appeal to something different. And I just don't know if Marco Rubio has those skills. While Rubio was quick to get in line, oh yeah, here we go. According to a Republican I spoke with, Rubio's unhappiness with Trump was brewing before Zelensky's visit went sideways. Two of the sources said Rubio was caught off guard when Trump appointed 9 foreign policy envoys with high-profile assignments, such as ending the wars in Gaza and Ukraine. The envoys all have offices in the White House, one of the sources said, which gives people the impression the envoys have more access to Trump than Rubio. During his Senate confirmation hearings in January, Rubio said, "The way this will work and how I anticipate it will work is these envoys work for the president in coordination with us." The source added that Rubio also disapproved of Trump's decision to revoke former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's government security detail. Marco and Pompeo are close, so that decision was egg on Marco's face, the source said. When asked about Pompeo's security, by the way, this is completely spite-based. They removed like Anthony Fauci's security detail. They removed Mark Milley's security detail. They removed Mark Pompeo's security detail. If you look at who they're removing the security detail of after they increased Trump's security detail post-assassination, it is anybody that Trump has beef with. Mike Pompeo, former Trump ally, no longer, has beef with him, so fuck him. John Bolton, this is a guy the Iranians have actually tried to assassinate. I don't like John Bolton, okay? I don't care if I can ramble, out of, if he wants to bomb everything, and we agree that the Russians should be bombed out of Ukraine, right, by the Ukrainians, right? That one broken clock moment is not going to make me feel kumbaya with Mr. Bomb Everything, right? But the man was had multiple attempts on his life from the Iranians, because he wants to bomb everything, including them. And when that security detail was given to him, it was to stop future assassination attempts from the Iranians. Now that it's been removed, obviously there's a question about John Bolton's security, but also anybody else's security that, could be high profile or targeted by either domestic political crazies or foreign governments. And these are all people that he has spites with. It's all spite-based. I don't care about your safety. Go fucking die. That's what it is. When asked about Pompeo's security on the Megyn Kelly show, Rubio said, "We don't want to see any Americans harmed, but those decisions about who we provide security for is based on a risk assessment. And those risk assessments were done, and it led to that outcome and that conclusion." I don't believe that. Reached for comment on this story, a spokesperson for the State Department said, "We are fielding an incredibly high volume of inquiries. We refer you to the transcripts and readouts of Secretary Rubio's recent meetings and public remarks for insights and information on these matters." Wow, so they gave no response. My God. My goodness. Anyway, man, this is a long fall for grace for Rubio, man. 2015, 2016 presidential hopeful to the neutered, clipped Secretary of State of the Trump administration, who's not even in the room when these decisions are being made. But then, when these decisions that he doesn't agree with are made, and he's not even in the room to hear how it was made or how the thinking led to that conclusion, he has to go on CNN and defend it to a bunch of people who can see it in his eyes that he doesn't really believe in it. That his head's just not in the game. My goodness. To think that Elon Musk could be having more of a foreign policy impact than Marco Rubio, the current Secretary of State. You know what? I gotta listen to his defense of the Trump meeting. Hey, thank you so much, Manic Shade, for the primer. This time for 27 months. It's Biden sent HIMARS and Patriots Trump, and Obama sent blankets. God. It's great. Trump's in there just bragging so much about sending the javelins that he tried to block and Congress sent, and then blocks HIMARS sharing data. By the way, if we don't share intelligence, weapons that we've sent them are basically useless. For example, the HIMARS, the Gimlers, that needs American intelligence assistance for them to be effective. They could still fire them. It's just going to be a lot less accurate. And considering Ukraine's ammunition deficiency with the Russians, they need to make every shot count. It's undercutting the usefulness of previous aid.
Levi_C has donated $5. Based HST shirt.
Oh, thank you. You like it? Like my shirt? Okay. Let's listen to Marco Rubio try to defend we're going to watch this before we get into the big news today, the cutting off of all the aid and what this means. I'm just trying to get warmed up because I'm not happy, as many could imagine. Bad. It's bad. Bad news bears.
Secretary of State, who is in that room today, Marco Rubio. Thank you so much, Secretary Rubio, for being here. We just heard from President Zelensky. He said he does not think that he owes President Trump an apology for what happened inside the Oval Office today. Do you feel otherwise?
I do, because you guys don't see, you guys only saw the end. You saw what happened today. You don't see all the things that led up to this. So let me explain. The president's been very clear. He campaigned on this. He thinks this war should have never started. He believes, and I agree, that had he been president, it never would have happened. Now here we are. He's trying to bring an end.
By the way, who cares? Who cares? I'm sorry. I'm done treating these like serious points. These are points made maliciously. These are not points I think made honestly. Okay? Even if Trump thinks he actually thinks it, I can't believe that somebody like Marco Rubio actually believes this. Definitely considering what he's previously said about Ukraine. But like, oh, Trump didn't want this war to start. Nobody wanted the war to start. What a meaningless point. What a meaningless point. Imagine FDR gets out there, 1941, a day that will, oh my God, it's a day that will live in infamy. Oh my God, what have they done to the great territory at the time of Hawaii? Well, guys, I didn't want a war. Well, of course you didn't want a war. Nobody wanted a war. But now the conditions of a war have fallen upon you. Nobody, oh, I didn't want a tornado. Oh, I didn't want a fucking hurricane. Oh, I didn't want a flood. Just get it over with. That's not, sometimes when you lead countries, when you lead nations, when you lead civilizations, as a leader, you are trying to, I've made this Mark Twain comparison so many times that I'm never going to stop. You're guiding a raft down the river. If there's a rock coming down, you have to push your way out in front of it. You can't just stomp on your fate and say, no rock, no rock, no rock. If the Russians invaded and they were not willing to concede on ridiculous terms, and Trump has yet to outline how he would have truly avoided the war outside of me and Putin, we're close, we're friendly, we're so nice. We would have played hopscotch at the back of the Kremlin with the reflection of the Golden Dome, giving us a beautiful tan. No. I'm done with it. It's just, who cares if you wish there wasn't a war? What does that mean in 1944? What does that mean in 1943? Very little. The war's here.
End of this conflict, we've explained very clearly what our plan is here, which is we want to get the Russians to a negotiating table. We want to explore whether peace is possible.
It's not with the Ukrainians at it.
Understand this. They also understand that this agreement that was supposed to be signed today was supposed to be an agreement that binds America economically to Ukraine, which to me, as I've explained, and I think the president alluded to today, is a security guarantee in its own way. Because
he doesn't believe any of this. He's such a malicious fucking grifter. He's abandoned every single thing that he believes. And look, I don't believe the things he believes, okay? I disagree with 80 to like 85% of what Marco Rubio believes. We'll probably like find an area like we both believe the First Amendment is important. You know, we both support Ukraine. You know, there could be like, you can find areas of agreement, but I don't agree with this guy on anything. This dude is abandoning everything he believes in. Oh, a security. Well, don't worry, we'll have a trade deal. The Russians will be scared to bomb a trade deal. Trade deals are scary. I mean, what happens when you bomb a trade deal? No, really, what happens when you bomb a trade deal? I know what happens when you bomb a NATO state. You get bombed back. I know what happens when you bomb America. You get bombed back. You get invaded. I know what happens when you violate Article 5. I know what happens when violates an alliance structure. That's what makes these strong deterrences. I have no fucking clue what happens when you just bomb a trade route. Especially, what if they decide not to bomb the American-owned businesses? They just decide to bomb everything else. That's why it's not a strong security assurance. We had American businesses in Ukraine before the Russian invasion in 2014 and 2022. The Ukrainian economy, while not perfect, it was on a positive trajectory in 2022. We were integrating ourselves to the Ukrainians more and more. So what happens when they bomb a trade route? Do you think, and let me say, let's put aside what actually happens. What do the Russians think happens? Because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about stopping another war. We're talking about a serious security assurance. And a security assurance is only serious if those that you intend to spook it off with, like a scarecrow, believe in it. If the Russians come up and they don't believe the scarecrow, they don't believe the scary trade deal is going to be, is going to be enough to make us come in and bash in the dome of the Kremlin, then they're not going to respect it. And I don't believe a trade deal would be enough. The Ukrainians don't believe a trade deal would be enough. And the Russians certainly don't believe a trade deal would be enough to dissuade of future invasions, or they wouldn't have agreed to it so easily. Not to mention, Donald Trump also says he wants to remove sanctions on Russia. And he wants to increase America and Russia's economic cooperation. So here is something I want to throw out to you guys, and I think this is actually quite interesting, especially since the Russians are offering rare earth mineral access. If the Americans make a trade deal and an economic deal with the Ukrainians in order to make us economically entwined with them so the Russians would be dissuaded from invading, but then do the exact same goddamn thing with the Russians, how does that dissuade anything? Then the Russians will just be like, okay, then they'll lose us. They'll lose us and the Ukrainians. If they cut off ties with us, they replay sanctions. How does that dissuade anything? Outside of the fact of kind of like openly rewarding the invasion, they now have leverage too, because you've economically intertwined yourself with the Russians as well. Look, and I'm not saying it has no deterrence effect. Maybe it could have a slight deterrence effect, but saying that this is a security guarantee of any sort is a fat fucking lie, okay? If that's the case, we need to stop sending Israel bombs. We need to stop sending Israel anything. We need to start a hummus deal and be done with it. And then peace shall descend upon the Middle East, and the Israelis will thank you for giving us the best security assurance ever. You bought our hummus. Thank you. Thank you so much. Why do we have troops in Korea? We should just like go have the K-pop people go on tour. What could have been a stronger security assurance than K-pop people going on tour? Why did we build NATO and expand it into West Germany? Why didn't we just trade their sauerkraut? It's fucking stupid. And this guy is Secretary of State. This is the adult in the room. This spineless jelly freak who could never stand up to Trump because the job depends on him not standing up to Trump is supposed to be the one who is supposed to correct Trump when he says the stupid nonsense. And he doesn't have the spine to do it, to see it to Trump. He's not going to do it to the American public. And so, like, man, I don't even know if he was in the room when these decisions were made, how much of an impact it would actually make, man. I mean, come on. A trade deal is a security insurance. I'm sorry, I'm going on a bit, but it's just ridiculous. A trade deal, security assurance.
We're involved. It's now us. It's our interests. That was all explained.
Your interests are already at stake.
All understood. And nonetheless, for the last 10 days, in every engagement we've had with the Ukrainians, there's been complications in getting that point across, including the public statements that President...
What do you mean complications in getting that point across? So what Marco Rubio is saying is a trade deal is enough of a security assurance. If that's the case, why do we need NATO, Marco? Here's my question. Why does NATO matter? Marco Rubio's been a warrior his whole life for NATO expansion, NATO membership. He loves NATO. This is a dude who would be like singing love songs to NATO at karaoke night, man. This dude loves NATO. If these trade deals are so magic, why not just dissolve NATO and just hope that trade and economic integration will just descend peace upon Europe? Just like how trade and economic integration has brought peace to the Pacific. It's just silly. It's just silly. Like, it'd be one thing if he said, look, we think that economic integration will make it more believable that the Russians could maybe think, like, you could make an argument it could add a little bit, but you call it a security guarantee instead of a slight deterrence is misrepresentation to the point of malicious lie.
Zelensky has made. But they insisted on coming to D.C. This agreement could have been signed 5 days ago, but they insisted on coming to Washington, and there was should have been a very clear understanding. Don't come here and create a such scenario where you're going to start lecturing us about how diplomacy isn't going to work. President Zelensky took it in that direction.
By the way, when he says start lecturing us about how diplomacy isn't going to work, right? Okay. Now, Marco Rubio's got fat fucking ears, so I know he heard Zelensky. What Zelensky said is that the Russians have broken ceasefires 25 times, okay? And what are we going to do to make sure it's not 26 outside of this, like, trade deal? We need a security assurance. He was like, the security assurances are important because, you know, the Russians are untrustworthy. And Trump's response to that, and this is what he's trying to avoid, Trump's response to that was, I trust Putin. That was his defense. When Zelensky said he broke our agreements 25 times, he said he wouldn't invade in 2014, invaded, and the whole time said he wasn't invading to cause confusion and chaos. In 2022, said he wasn't going to invade again, then he invades. And after Zelensky brings up the point of 25 times, Trump's counterpoint was, Putin trusts me, Putin will respect me, me and Putin are a BBF forever. We got matching keychains. So don't worry about it. There wasn't even like an attempt to be like, look, we're strong. The Russians is not going to mess with a strong Trump administration because if they tried to mess with us, we'll take them on and we'll smash them and we'll do this and we'll do that. No, it was just naive trust. How could he not bring that up? How could he not bring up the fact that the person you're naively trusting has violated these agreements before? How can he bring up the fact that the Russians are still refusing to even allow any European troop deployments? The bare minimum deterrence that the Trump administration is like, okay, at least do that. Like, they're setting up the stage to make it easy for them to invade again if they so choose. And you're being naive about it. And so, of course, Zelensky is going to bring it up. Of course he is. And that's not even to talk about all the times that Trump lied during the meeting about the amount of aid we've sent or otherwise.
And it ended in a predictable outcome as a result.
Or like all the complaining about, have you ever said thank you? Now, there's been plenty of compilations online about JD Vance like whining about Zelensky saying thank you and all the times he said thank you to the United States. But guess what? The whole meeting was like something like 40 minutes. He says thank you at the start. He says thank you at the start of the meeting. Not only has Zelensky said thank you like some 93 other times, somebody's making some counter online. He said thank you at the start of the meeting.
It's unfortunate. That wasn't supposed to be this way, but that's the path he chose. And I think, frankly, sends his country backwards in regards to achieving peace, which is what President Trump wants at the end of the day, is for this war to end. He's been as consistent as anyone can be about what his objective is here.
But what specifically do you want to see President Zelensky apologize for?
Well, apologize for turning this thing into the fiasco for him that it became. There was no need for him to go in there and become antagonistic. Look, this thing went off the rails. You were there.
Okay, so to be clear, the apology is for causing this. Didn't really say how he caused it besides bringing up security assurances. Because I thought it was JD Vance being a little snobby brat that caused it, really. Not the fact that Zelensky asked a simple foreign policy question and Trump and JD Vance were so out of their environment, so just out of their element, that they immediately sunk and resorted to insults and like, say thank you, like a child. One second, can we check the live JD Vance live cam? I think we've introduced a new technology here at DylanBurnsTV. We've introduced a JD Vance live cam to check on the man to see how he's doing. How's he doing right now? I don't really know what that was. What a strange man. Anyway, Black-Pilled Kiwi, thank you so much for the 5 New Zealand dollars. I think the most qualified person to explain that diplomacy won't work would be the leader of a nation invaded by their neighbor who's after their land, probably. Yeah.
There, I believe it went off the rails when he said, let me ask you a question to the vice president. What kind of diplomacy are you talking about? Well, this is a serious thing. I mean, thousands of people have been killed, thousands. And he talks about all these horrible things that have happened to prisoners of war and children.
By the way, when he says all that, like thousands of people have died, the response from a brave CNN host, okay? And I'm not saying Caitlin Collins isn't somebody to be confrontational. I'm just saying this is what I would say, okay? Would be, okay, so when will Trump make the Israelis come to table with Hamas? Well, Hamas is a terrorist organization. They killed all those civilians on October 7th. Oh, they've killed civilians. Oh, they targeted civilians. Let me introduce you to the human safari. Let me introduce you to Bucha. Let me introduce you to what happened at Irpin. What happened at Izium. What happened in many places all over the country. It's not a consistent foreign policy. Marco Rubio knows it. All this takes is like the slightest level of prodding on Marco Rubio to show the inconsistencies in his foreign policy. Like, you can find people probably in Trump's orbit who's of the opinion that, yeah, screw them both. Screw all foreign aid. And at least that's like a consistent position, right? But I mean, like, oh, we don't want to continue supporting this forever war, right? Oh, yeah, and the Israelis and Palestinians, that solution's right around the corner with Trump Gaza Heights.
True, all bad. This is what we're dealing with here. It needs to come to an end. We are trying to bring it to an end. The way you bring it to an end is you get Russia to the table to talk. And he understands that attacking Putin, no matter how anyone may feel about him personally, forcing the president into a position where you're trying to goad him into attacking Putin, calling him names.
By the way, Trump calls Zelensky names. Trump calls Zelensky a dictator. Trump attacks Ukraine. Trump lies about the amount of aid that's been sent to Ukraine. He lies about death numbers all the time. He lies up and down the entire conflict, right? That's not even talking about the people in his immediate circle that have lied up and down the conflict. Now, Marco Rubio knows this. And he's trying to goad. Why would it be goading Trump just to be like, is Putin a dictator? Why can't Trump answer that question? But he can very easily say Zelensky's a dictator. Oh, goading him into attacking Putin. We need to be nice to Putin and have diplomacy. Why does that not go both ways? So Trump can go to Zelensky and just like try to get him to get on his knees and bark like a dog. But over to Putin, he has to get his face right in there to brown nose. Why is that how diplomacy works? You bash your allies and you praise your enemies. Well, I guess from Trump's perspective, it could actually be that he is doing that.
Maximalist demands about Russia having to pay for the reconstruction, all the sorts of things
Well,
that
he isn't, as in he's doing the reverse.
you talk about in a negotiation. Well, when you start talking about that aggressively, and the president's a deal maker, he's made deals his entire life, you're not going to get people to the table. And so you start to perceive that maybe Zelensky doesn't want a peace deal. He says he does, but maybe he doesn't. And that active, open undermining of efforts to bring about peace is deep.
It's just so silly. Like, he knows that Zelensky wants a peace deal. Marco Rubio knows. That's why he's got those shadows under his eyes. He's starting to look, he looks sad and sunken, like somebody just sucked the life force out of him. It's because he doesn't believe anything he's saying, right? This is a soulless husk that used to be Marco Rubio. I don't know where we're going to call him moving forward, but this is a sunken husk that used to be Marco Rubio.
Deeply frustrating for everyone who's been involved in communications with them leading up to today. And I think he should apologize for wasting our time for a meeting that was going to end the way it did.
Wasting our time. All he asked was, what security assurance do we have? And Trump's answer was, trust Putin. Trust Putin. Do you trust Putin, Marco? Can we get you to lead the Trust Putin parade? You know, just wave the Russian flag, marching down the street, Slava Russia. Like, what did you... Marco Rubio would have done the exact same thing as Zelensky's shoes. It's hard to know really anyone. Honestly, most people probably would have gone harder than Zelensky in Zelensky's shoes.
You yourself have said previously that Putin cannot be trusted in negotiations. That was the point that President Zelensky was ultimately making during that conversation, is that there cannot be an agreement without security guarantees, because he was talking about all the ceasefire agreements before, or agreements that Putin has just blown past.
25.
I mean, do you still feel that way, that Putin cannot be trusted in these negotiations?
Well, I was there yesterday when the president said in front of the media that our approach is going to be trust but verify. President Trump's made deals his entire life. He's not going to get suckered into some deal that's not a real deal. We all understand this. We understand it on our end for certain. And so the goal here is to get to
Okay, so how?
a place. We have to explore whether peace is possible. I've said this repeatedly. I don't know. I think it is, based on what they've said so far, but we have to explore that. How else is this war going to end? I ask people, what is the European plan?
Get the Russians and the Ukrainians to go to the table together instead of getting the Russians to continue to believe they can just talk over their heads and dictate their affairs without them. That would probably be a first step.
To end this war. I can tell you what one foreign minister told me, and I'm not going to say who it was, but I can tell you what one of them told me, and that is that the war goes on for another year, and at that point, Russia will feel so weakened that they'll beg for a peace. That's another year of killing, another year of dying, another year of destruction, and by the way, not a very realistic plan in my point of view. So,
okay, so Marco Rubio's position is we need to end the war in Gaza right away. We need to, and what's your plan? We still haven't get rid of Hamas? Another year of killing Hamas? 2 more years of killing Hamas? Anthony Blinken said before he left that they regained most of their membership. How's this gonna work? It's just, again, man, war is bad, war is brutal, but if you just make a shitty peace deal and then start a war again in 3 years, that lasts another 3 years, what have you achieved? All you've done is change the demographic of who's going to be fighting and dying in that war. There's going to be the people who are younger Ukrainians now.
If there's a chance of peace, even if it's a 1% chance, that needs to be explored. And that's what President Trump is trying to do here.
President Trump said just when he was leaving the White House after that meeting that he doesn't think President Zelensky wants peace. But isn't that why the Ukrainian leader was in the Oval Office for that meeting today?
Well, he was in the Oval Office to sign a minerals rights deal. That's what he was in the Oval Office to sign today. But again, when you have comments that deliberately appear to be I mean, after having discussed this repeatedly, deliberately appear to be geared towards making the argument that peace is not possible. You know, again, I turn to the...
See, this is the problem, the problem with Zelensky is he's not messaging with them, right? He's not going out there saying, yes, Trump is the only person Putin respects, and Trump will make Putin stay in line, and Trump, and you know, he's the only one I think peace is possible around it. Oh, security assurances don't matter when Trump's president, because Trump is just so strong, and Trump is just so powerful, and his muscles. Because he's not doing that, because he's not, you know, adding to the messaging tour of Trump the peacemaker who deserves the Nobel Prize for what he's about to do. Because he's not adding to that, and he is instead expressing the obvious concerns of what if the Russians invade right again once you've ditched us, then what? Because they violated 25 security assurances. They didn't even say peace is never possible. Peace can never happen. We can never talk to the Russians. They didn't say that. They just said, hey, these guys broke agreements 25 times before. How do I make sure this isn't number 26? And Trump's response was, trust. Trust, my child. Trust. What did you expect was going to be the response from them? Of course he was going to have questions.
He turns to the vice president. What kind of diplomacy are you talking about? Almost as if to say, these people, you can't deal with them. You can't have any negotiations with Putin because he can't be trusted, and you're just wasting your time on
Now, what he's doing right now is he's pulling the quotes like out of context. These are like in between statements where like JD Vance is saying something. He's like, what diplomacy are you talking about? Because JD Vance starts like unloading. So he's trying to grab these moments to be, oh, look how disrespectful he was. He talked back to JD. Isn't that disrespectful?
Negotiations. Well, he's directly, basically undermining everything the president has told him he's trying to do.
He's not undermining. He's bringing up the obvious problems. If there's a gaping hole in your boat, he's not undermining your boat by saying, what the fuck's up with the hole?
Look, there's no need for that. You start to suspect, does he really want an end to this war? Does he just think that, you know, we have to do whatever he says and give him anything he wants without any end game? That was the Biden strategy. That was the Biden strategy. We were funding a stalemate. We were funding a meat grinder. And unfortunately, for the Ukrainians, the Russians have more meat to grind, and they don't care about human life. We've seen it, human waves and North...
I mean, like if war was a spreadsheet, you know.
Koreans, etc. And so this is a very complex thing. It's very delicate. It's very costly. It's very bloody. It needs to be brought to an end, but it isn't going to be brought to an end.
It's very bloody. We need to stop this suffering. So let's stop sharing intelligence that helps the Ukrainians see the missiles as they hit their children's hospitals so they can get the kids out in time. Let's stop that to save lives. To save lives. It's so malicious, man.
With public pronouncements and maximalist demands in the public, but in real diplomacy, the vice president was right.
By the way, that's how it goes. In public, you make demands, and then in private, you concede in trade for other things. You don't go out in public, concede every... I know you're angry because he's making maximalist demands, and Zelensky's angry because you're conceding everything before even starting negotiations, but like, yeah, you usually, you start with you try to start with the strongest hand you can, and then you trade the cards you can to get what you want. And maybe not everybody walks away completely satisfied, but maybe everybody walks away like being able to live another day or whatever. That's how negotiations supposed to go, supposedly. You don't give up everything. NATO membership, U.S. troop deployments, whether Ukraine's even at the negotiating table without concessions.
When you say they don't care about life, are you talking about the Russians or the Ukrainians?
Well, the Russians, I mean, they're conscripting by the hundreds of thousands. They brought in North Korean troops that were slaughtered in Kursk, and they keep going because they got more people. That's the other fact. Look, and it's, you know, again, we go back to the same point. I'm not going to fall into this trap of the who's bad and who's evil. People can make those conclusions. People have seen how this narrative is played out and where we are.
See, for Marco Rubio, you know, you talk about Israel Hamas. We need to talk about this war in purely moral terms. These monsters on October 7th flew over on their devilish gliders and then terrorized these communities. Russia, let's not talk about this in moral terms. Bucha who? Bucha what? Bucha, I never met Bucha. Who's her?
We are today and how this all started and so forth. The point now is it has to end. And the way it ends is you get people to a negotiating table. And the president, who's the ultimate deal maker, knows you don't get people to a negotiating table when you're calling them names and you're accusing them of things, because at the end of the day, this is not a political campaign.
Question, what deal did Trump negotiate within America? Like, you know, to pass a bill maybe? And he was president for 4 years, you know. You can say, well, he just turned president. He was president for 4 years, you know. He can. What did he what deal did he make?
Okay.
I take him being the deal maker more seriously if he wasn't the most partisan person ever who doesn't know how to reach across the aisle to save his life.
This is high stakes international diplomacy and an effort to bring about an end to a very, very dangerous war.
But you yourself, sir, have said before that you believe Putin is a war criminal, that is a widely accepted fact. You've called him a butcher. And you said that as a Secretary of State, you do believe it's important for someone with such global influence as you have to speak with that kind of moral clarity.
Yeah, and at this moment, as Secretary of State, my job working for the president is to deliver peace, to end this conflict and end this war. Ultimately, that is the job of the State Department. The State Department.
See, before you need to speak with more clarity. Now that you were in the State Department, more clarity, schmarity. You don't need more clarity here. More clarity. It gets very morally blurry and foggy up there at the State Department.
Department doesn't fight wars, it ends them. It tries to end them. And that's usually, by the way, celebrated. I mean, throughout history, I've watched presidents that bring about an end to wars and conflicts, and people celebrate that. They applaud it. I think we should be very proud and happy that we have a president whose prime objective is not to get into wars, but to prevent wars and to get out of wars.
Come on, dude. Yankee Yanukovych is talking about invading Greenland. He's talking about seizing Panama by force. This is a man who is showing, like, journalists invasion plans of Iran for funsies. Right? Classified documents. This is one of the cases against him, by the way, that's now been shut down because he's president and we've decided as a country he should not be held accountable to such things after we decided Hillary cannot be president because of the emails. Anyway, point is, no.
Whose prime objective is not to get into wars.
Not to get into wars.
To prevent wars and to get out of wars. That is a very noble, laudable goal. Everyone should be applauding it.
Then he just designated the cartels terrorist organizations, which is going to give the president the authority to use the AUMF, the authorization for use of military force against terrorist groups, to drone strike Mexico without congressional approval or the approval of the Mexican government. This is a man who highly escalated drone strikes while in office, while trying to cover up the information on said drone strikes to the press, to the journalists, to decrease transparency. This is not the peacemaker in chief.
And he should be given the space to do that, not undermined by demands that he call Putin names or that we say things that impede the ability to conduct.
He demands he calls Putin names. Do you think if Trump said, yeah, Putin's a dictator, that would change anything? How much? Do you think Putin would say, I'm sorry, I was going to pick up the phone before, but Trump, you hurt my feelings. You know I deeply care about democracy. You know I deeply care about freedom of the press. You know I deeply care about civil society and the rights of minorities. And a people's right to rule. I'm so offended, Mr. Trump. This is... Come on. Grow up.
Real diplomacy, as the vice president said today.
To follow up on what you just said a moment ago, are you saying that you have doubts that President Zelensky wants this war to come to an end?
What I have doubts about is whether he's willing to say and do the things that we need in order to get a negotiation.
See, he throws something out there. It's provocative. I don't even know if Zelensky wants the war to end. Really? You believe that? Well, you know what I really meant to say. Dude, he's so slippery.
Again, you guys, this has been going on for 10 days. And, you know, to see things in the press saying we're not coordinating with the Ukrainians, that's absolutely false. Over the last 10 days, the Ukrainians have met with the Secretary of Commerce, the Secretary of State, the Vice President.
By the way, they're not coordinating with the Ukrainians anymore. They shut off all the support. So I know this is a 4-day-old interview, but they stopped.
United States.
They go not coordinating with the Ukrainians. If the Ukrainians not at the table, they're not. Look. Marco Rubio probably understands this better than most. If you're not in the room when these decisions are being made, how much influence do you get to have on the decision maker, Marco? You're not in a lot of these rooms when these decisions are being made, and therefore you have little influence. Why would that be any different for the Ukrainians?
had a phone call with President Trump, and he was in the Oval Office today. I've talked to the foreign minister of Ukraine 3 times in the last 10 days. The argument that we're not engaging, but yet you
Yeah, but you talking to him means nothing because you're not in the room.
keep reading these press accounts about, oh, well, they're leaving us out. We're not involved. We're not engaged. None of these things are true, and it continues. So all that led up to today in a deep...
The Ukrainians got input on whether or not that election demand from the Russians should have been included. Did they get input on that before all this stuff was announced publicly? What about U.S. troop deployments in Ukraine? Was there a long meeting about exactly why maybe we should not announce in advance that troops shouldn't be or not going to be deployed, and maybe troops aren't deployed, but we agreed to it in concession for all those kidnapped Ukrainian children? Really, they were, because I have a hard time believing that they were just like, you know what? Not only are we okay with you giving that up, just give it up right now. Don't even pretend that you want it and therefore trade it for something else. That's very nice of them.
Deep sense of frustration. And my hope is that this all can be reset and maturity can kick in and some pragmatism, because this war tonight, people will die in Ukraine. Tonight, people will die in this conflict. We're trying to bring an end to this conflict, which is unsustainable. It's an unsustainable, bloody war that has to come to an end. And right now, the only leader in the world that can even have a chance of bringing about an end to this is named President Donald Trump. And we need to give him the opportunity to try and do that. And when you see efforts to impede it, when you tell someone, don't say, let's not talk about these things, let's not go in this direction, because it makes it harder for us to engage, and they insist on doing it anyways, you start to wonder. I don't like to impugn people's motives, but you start to wonder what's behind it. So look.
It's because the idea that a trade deal in the trust of that butcher is going to be enough to dissuade another invasion after 25 violations. That's the motivation, I think, more than, I just like power more than I like my people. Which, I mean, is how you would look at this if this was maybe like a Disney movie and Trump was the hero and Zelensky was the villain.
Again, let's hope that this can be salvaged, but I'm not sure after today.
You don't believe that you're not sure that this can be salvaged? I mean, can this relationship between Zelensky and Trump be repaired in your view?
I think anything is possible, but it has to go back to the point that President Trump is interested in being involved in this for the purposes of bringing about an enduring and lasting peace. That's what he wants to achieve. And I think if I'm a country, that's involved in a war with a bigger country, who's losing thousands of people, who's had 3 million people leave my country because they can't be there, who is facing these challenges, I would be thanking a president who's trying to help bring about an end to this war.
They did. He thanked them at the start of the meeting. They just didn't remember because they have the memory of a goldfish.
I would be thanking him, and I would be supportive of what he's trying to do, at least in my public pronouncements and in my public posture. And we didn't see that today, and we haven't.
You did. You just didn't pay attention.
Seen that for the last few days. Now, will that change? I hope so. It should, for the purposes of global peace and stability in Europe and around the world.
It's all about groveling. It's all about groveling. If you don't grovel sufficiently, not good. Not good. Okay, oh my God, what's this? I'm loving all these JD Vance edits, I gotta say. They are fun. I have been enjoying them. Okay, let's move on.